My name is Daisy. I'm 28 years old. My parents always treated my sibling like the golden child, so I was sure I'd be left with nothing when they passed. Honestly, I'd made my peace with it, or so I thought. But on the day the will was read, in a stuffy lawyer's office that smelled like old paper and my brother's smug cologne, a secret clause made everyone's jaw hit the floor. It didn't just change the inheritance. It unraveled our entire family history. It exposed a betrayal so deep and calculated, it left everyone in the room breathless. They all thought they knew the story, the successful son and the one who was other. But they were about to find out my parents were better storytellers than any of us could have ever guessed. Growing up, the layout of our family was simple. You had my parents, and then you had the person they practically worshipped, my brother Leo. And then there was me, Alex. I wasn't a pillar of the family. I was the foundation they all stood on, invisible and completely taken for granted. This wasn't some quiet family secret. It was the theme song of our lives. It played at full volume on repeat. It was like Leo was born with a halo. He was the firstborn, the son, the heir to the suburban empire my parents ruled. When he took his first steps, my dad bought a camcorder that cost more than our monthly mortgage. A few years later, when I started walking, my mom jotted it down in a baby book about a week after the fact. The ink was smudged, a total afterthought. Birthdays were always the main event for this blatant favoritism. For Leo's 16th, a brand new cherry red convertible magically appeared in the driveway, wrapped in a bow so big it looked ridiculous. My dad filmed the whole thing, my mom leading a blindfolded Leo outside, while everyone cheered as he put on a big, fake gasp of surprise. He already knew he was getting it. He'd picked the car out a month earlier. For my 16th birthday 2 years later, I got a set of classic books from my mom and a firm handshake from my dad. "High time you read the greats, Alex," he said. "Leo has the charm, you have the books. It balances out." That was their favorite word, balance. In their minds, burying Leo in gifts and praise, while I got quiet nods and the expectation of perfection was their version of keeping things fair. Leo's C-average report cards were proof of his social intelligence. My mom would say, "He's a people person, not a test taker," totally ignoring the teacher's notes about him, not even trying. My straight A report cards were just met with, "Well, of course, that's what we expect from you, Alex." No celebration, no reward. My success was my job. Leo's mediocrity was a charming personality quirk. This spilled into everything. Chores were my job. I mowed the lawn, did the dishes, and washed my own laundry, and usually Leo's too. Leo was always too busy. Busy with what? I never knew. Football practice he quit after 2 weeks? A garage band that never actually left the garage? A string of part-time jobs he'd get fired from for having an attitude problem? The money gap became a canyon when we got older. My parents paid for Leo's entire 4-year university experience. Not just tuition, his apartment, his car, his spring break trips to Cancun, and his endless credit card debt. He majored in business, mostly because it sounded good at dinner parties, and skated by on charm and my parents' money. For me, there was no safety net. The college talk was short and brutal. "Alex, you're smart," my dad said. Not as a compliment, but like it freed him from any responsibility. "You'll get scholarships. You can work. It'll build character." So that's what I did. I worked 2 jobs while going to community college to save money, then transferred to a state school. I spent my nights writing scholarship essays while Leo was out partying on our parents' dime. I graduated with honors and 0 debt, all on my own, feeling a bone-deep kind of tired. When I showed my parents my diploma, my father just glanced at it and said, "Good, now you can finally start paying your own way." I'd been paying my own way for years. He just never noticed. Leo's adult life was one expensive failure after another, and my parents cushioned every single fall. His first startup, a sock company, went broke in 6 months, leaving a mountain of debt my dad quietly paid off. His next brilliant idea, being a day trader, ended with him losing 50 grand of my parents' retirement savings. But there were never any consequences. He's just finding his footing, my mother would sigh. It's hard out there. Meanwhile, I found a steady accounting job, saved for 5 years to buy a small condo, and lived a quiet, responsible life. My parents never asked about it. Instead, they called me when they needed help. I fixed their leaky faucets, set up their new computers, and drove them to doctor's appointments. I was their on-call handyman and chauffeur, and it felt more and more like a one-way street. The last few years were the hardest. When my mother's health started to fail, and my father's right after, the roles were set in stone. I became their caregiver. I lived 20 minutes away. Leo lived an hour away, but he acted like it was a flight to another continent. I'd love to help Alex, but work is just insane, he'd say, and I could hear a golf swing or a clinking glass in the background. So I was the one managing pills, doctors, groceries, and scary late-night calls. I handled the home health care and the nightmare of insurance paperwork. And through all of it, my parents kept sending money to Leo. One day, while I was arguing with a billing department on the phone, I saw a bank statement on the table. My mother had just sent Leo $10,000. The memo? For the house project. He and his wife were remodeling their kitchen. I remember finally confronting my mother, my voice shaking with exhaustion. Mom, why? You need this money for your care. I'm here every single day. She gave me that familiar, defensive look. Leo has a family, Alex. He has pressures you don't understand. Then she delivered the line that was the story of my life. Besides, you're so capable. You always figure things out. We don't have to worry about you. It wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal. My competence was my curse. My independence was their excuse to neglect me. That's when I finally got it. They didn't see me as their child. They saw me as a utility. Leo was a project to be funded, and I was just the guy who kept the lights on. I kept caring for them, but something inside me just broke. Any hope that they'd finally see the truth just died. I was a ghost in my own family, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that their will would be the final proof of my invisibility. My parents passed away within 2 months of each other. Their decline was a slow, painful marathon, and the end was both a relief and a deep sorrow. I handled everything. The calls, the funerals, sorting through a lifetime of stuff that mostly reminded me of how left out I'd always felt. Leo and his wife, Sarah, swept in once the hard part was over. They walked through the house not with grief, but with the greedy excitement of new owners. Leo clapped me on the shoulder. "Good job with all this, Alex," he said, waving a hand at the neat boxes. "Really, you're a lifesaver. Now, Sarah and I are thinking we'll get a contractor in here next week to look at taking down this wall." He was already planning renovations. He talked about the house, the savings, the stocks as my inheritance, as if it were already a done deal. I felt like the hired help. He'd give me little to-do lists. "Alex, can you call the utility companies? And we'll need the house appraised, so if you could schedule that, it would be a huge help." The day of the will reading was cold and gray. We all met at the office of Mr. Harrison, their lawyer. The room was small and stuffy. Leo sat in a big armchair, looking like a king about to be crowned, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. Sarah sat next to him, notepad ready, trying to look sad, but mostly just looking excited. I sat on a stiff chair across from them, feeling as small as ever. I was expecting nothing. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and started reading. "We are here today to read the last will and testament of John and Mary Miller." He droned on with the legal stuff, and I just stared at the ceiling, trying to check out. Then he got to the point. Article 1, the primary residence, I hereby give, devise, and bequeath to my beloved son, Leo Miller. Leo nodded, all serious, as Sarah squeezed his hand. I felt that familiar dull ache, but no surprise. Article 2, all liquid assets, I hereby give, devise, and bequeath to my beloved son, Leo Miller. Sarah made a little note on her pad. Leo almost smiled. Article 3. All stocks, bonds, and other securities. I hereby give, devise, and bequeath to my beloved son, Leo Miller. On and on it went. The car, the furniture, the art, all of it to Leo. My stomach was a cold, hard knot. I could feel them watching me, waiting for me to break. Finally, Mr. Harrison looked at me. To my other child, Alex Miller, I leave the following, he read. I braced myself. I bequeath the antique music box from my grandmother's collection and the sum of $1,000. $1,000. After everything. It wasn't just an insult, it was a rounding error in Leo's massive inheritance. I felt sick. Leo leaned forward, faking compassion. I'm so sorry, Alex, he said, dripping with fake sympathy. But don't worry, Sarah and I will make sure you're taken care of. The offer was completely empty. I just nodded, unable to speak. I wanted to scream, but I was frozen. And then, right when I thought the humiliation was over, Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but it cut right through the silence. That, he said, looking over his glasses, concludes the primary bequests. However, there is a final codicil, an addendum, added 18 months ago. Leo frowned. A codicil? What's that? It means, Mr. Harrison said, his tone getting sharper, that everything I just read is contingent upon a specific condition. The room went dead silent. Mr. Harrison took a breath and read from a new page. Codicil, Article A. We have been made aware of our son Leo's persistent claims of financial hardship. Therefore, the inheritance of the family home, all liquid assets, and all securities is hereby made contingent upon the following condition. He paused. My heart was pounding. The inheritance to Leo Miller is conditional upon a full independent audit of all financial gifts and transfers made from us to him over the past 10 years. Should the total value of these gifts exceed $500,000, it will be deemed that our son's claims of hardship were misrepresented. In such an event, the bequests shall be rendered null and void. Leo's face went white. What? That's insane. Mr. Harrison kept reading. Furthermore, in the event that Leo Miller's inheritance is voided, the entirety of the estate shall be immediately and irrevocably redirected into the Alex Miller Trust Fund, which we established on March 12, 2015. I just stared at him. A trust fund? For me? From years ago? The lawyer wasn't done. He pulled out a thick stack of papers. Your parents, he said, looking right at a stunned Leo, were meticulous. They provided me with bank statements, copies of cleared checks, and this. He slid a sheaf of emails across the table. I could see Leo's name. These are emails where you, Leo, repeatedly pressure your parents for money, claiming you were on the brink of bankruptcy while, according to your own social media, you were vacationing in Europe. The truth was laid bare right there on the table. My parents weren't blind. They hadn't been fools. They knew. They had seen his greed and his lies. And they had set a trap. A perfect, legal, posthumous trap. The $1,000, the music box, it was all an act. They had to make the will look exactly like Leo wanted so he wouldn't suspect a thing. They gave him everything he wanted, right up until the moment it all turned to ash in his hands. The final brutal irony was that in their last act on Earth, my parents had finally, truly seen me. They protected me by outsmarting him, using his own greed as the weapon. And my inheritance wasn't a token sum. It was everything. The silence in the office shattered. Leo shot to his feet. This is a joke. My parents would never do this, he roared. You put them up to this. He jabbed a finger at me, his eyes wild. You were always jealous. You poisoned them against me. I was still in total shock, my head spinning. A trust fund, a trap. Sarah finally spoke up, hissing. Leo, calm down. Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene, he yelled. Did you not just hear him? They're trying to take everything. Mr. Harrison was impossibly calm. Mr. Miller, this isn't a debate. It's a legally binding codicil. The audit is not a request. It is a directive. And frankly, he said, glancing at the stack of bank statements, it looks like a formality. Your parents' records are exhaustive. Leo looked from the lawyer to me, and all the rage just deflated into pure panic. He turned to me, his voice suddenly pleading. Alex, you can't let this happen. Tell him to stop. You know Mom and Dad wouldn't have wanted this. You can't take the house from me. Where would my family live? The nerve of that question snapped me right out of my daze. After a lifetime of him taking everything, he was appealing to family loyalty? A loyalty he never, ever showed me? I found my voice, and it came out clear and steady. I'm not doing anything, Leo, I said. I'm going to follow our parents' final wishes. The look on his face, betrayal, shock, and pure hatred, is something I'll never forget. He stormed out, with Sarah scurrying behind him. In the quiet that followed, Mr. Harrison looked at me. Your parents were very proud of you, Alex, he said softly. They were terrified that Leo's endless needs would one day become your burden. This was their way of making sure your strength was rewarded, not punished. He explained that they'd been secretly funding the trust for years, building a nest egg for me that Leo could never get his hands on. The will wasn't just about money. It was about giving me validation. It was the truth, delivered like a court verdict. The days that followed were a storm of harassment. Leo's calls, which I ignored, turned into a flood of texts. First, the demands, Alex, call me now. We need to fix this. Tell Harrison to stop the audit. It's an invasion of my privacy. Then, the guilt trips. Mom would be ashamed of you, tearing the family apart over money. You're really going to make your only brother homeless? I hope you're happy. And finally, the threats. I will get lawyers. I will drag this through court for years. You will get nothing. You'll regret this. I read every message with a weird sense of calm. The words that used to wound me now felt totally hollow. After about the 100th message, I did something I never felt I could do before. I blocked his number. I blocked Sarah. I blocked all the relatives who called to tell me I was being cruel. I let the lawyer handle everything. The audit was quick. The total of my parents' gifts to Leo was well over $1 million. The clause was triggered. The old will was voided. And the entire estate, the house, the savings, everything, flowed into the Alex Miller Trust Fund. The real inheritance wasn't the money, though. It was the quiet, the freedom from that crushing sense of obligation, the feeling of a massive weight being lifted off my shoulders. Leo, of course, couldn't handle it. He and Sarah had been living way beyond their means, counting on that inheritance. Their house of cards collapsed. They had to sell their huge house, move into a small rental, and Leo had to get a real 9-to-5 job for the first time in his life. It wasn't my fault. It was just the bill for his life choices finally coming due. I sold the family home. Too many ghosts. I used some of the money to buy a new place that was truly mine, filled with my own peace. The rest sits in the trust, a quiet reminder of my parents' complicated, flawed, but ultimately powerful love. Sometimes I take out the antique music box they left me. It's a simple wooden thing. When I wind it, it plays a soft, delicate tune. It's not a grand gesture. It's quiet. And for the first time, I think I understand. They didn't see me as the forgotten foundation. They saw me as the music box, holding a quiet strength they chose to protect. I'm not a ghost in my own story anymore. I'm the one in charge of my future. So, that's my story. It's been a crazy journey, but it taught me that sometimes love isn't about what people say, but what they do, even if they do it in secret. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. If you enjoy stories like this, please think about liking and subscribing for more. I have one question for you, and I'd love to see your answers in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? After the truth came out, would you have shared any of the inheritance with Leo, or would you have let him face the consequences he built for himself? Let me know below.